Hello, everyone, and welcome to another ASEG Partner Webcast. My name is Susan Rivoletto, Membership Support Specialist here at ASEG, and I'll be your moderator today for this event. I'd like to thank everyone for taking the time to join us for this presentation. Today's webcast is being recorded. The link to the recording and the accompanying slides will be posted to the ASEG website, and all registrants will receive an email with the link to those materials. Today's webcast is titled, Why an Optimization Project Should Be in Your 2018 Plans, and it is brought to you by ERPfixers, an ASEG partner. I'd like to remind our audience members that you can submit your questions at any time by clicking on the purple Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. And now I'd like to hand it over to Paul from ERPfixers.
Thanks, Susan. Thank you, everyone, for attending this webcast. I'm going to take you through the next few slides, which discusses what ERPfixers is and who the speakers are. And then we'll get into the detail of the topics that we're going to discuss. So first of all, what is ERPfixers? We're an online platform for posting SAP requests, questions, and issues. And we also offer optimization assessments in most of the major SAP modules, FICO, MM, PP, SD, and so on. If you want to find out more about our platform, just go to our website, ERPfixers.com. So as for the speakers, we have Sydnie McConnell. She's a lead business systems analyst in SAP Finance. She has over 15 years experience with SAP Financials as an end user and systems analyst. She specializes in product costing and profitability analysis. And she's also the author of 2 books. One is SAP ERP User Guide, Tips to Increase Productivity, and First Steps in SAP, 2nd edition. I have worked as an ERP financials consultant since 1997 in North America and Europe. I specialize in FI and CO and integrated areas. I have written 2 books as well. One is 100 Things to Know About Financial Accounting, and the other is Reconciling COPA to the General Ledger. I'm also the founder of ERPfixers, and I have, before going to the next slide, the functional optimization part of ERPfixers actually came out after we started the platform. The platform was initially meant to be an on-demand platform for solving quick SAP issues and requests. But as we evolved, we found that a number of customers, even though they were reporting quick fix issues, there were underlying issues which were causing them. And instead of just working reactively to deal with these issues, it was more important to take a more proactive approach and see, is your system and the processes that it supports in line with how it should be for the system to work effectively? And that's what brought about this whole optimization exercise. So I'm going to, I want us to do a quick poll, which is going to just give me an idea of for the people on this, listening to this webcast, where they are in their path to optimization, whether it's still just something conceptual or if it's something that's, what the reasoning is, what the justification of the optimization is. So could you please select the option that applies to you? What is the main reason your organization might consider a functional optimization review? Is it a corporate strategy? Are you considering a move to S/4HANA? Do you have issues maintaining your system because it's suboptimal? Or do you want to reduce costs? So for the next 10 to 15 seconds, I will give you a chance to select the option that applies to you. And then I'll give you the results in the next slide. Okay, let's see what we have so far. So what is the results here? Quite interesting, actually. We have 0 that are doing it for corporate strategy reasons. That's interesting because it's one of my points later on in the webcast that should be one of the reasons you do this. So that's interesting. The next one, the one that has the most hits is considering a move to S/4HANA. Totally makes sense. The next is issues maintain a suboptimal system, and then the need to reduce costs obviously comes at maybe a little lower hit. It's interesting because obviously if this was 2-3 years ago, I'm pretty sure that the issues maintained in the suboptimal system will take the majority of hits, and considering the move to S/4HANA will probably not be as much. So very interesting, and thank you for participating in that. So to have an introduction to this webcast, what is functional optimization? It is not just a way to align business processes with SAP standard functionality. It really represents a strategic mindset across the business. It should be part of a business-wide strategy. It should involve an undertaking to bring improvement and increase efficiency throughout the enterprise. And it is a clean path to leverage new functionality. So there's a number of things there. I think the first thing, based on the poll, you would see that I'm trying to emphasize here is that it shouldn't just be a means to an end, a means to moving to a new functionality, or just because, you know, something has gone wrong. It should be part of strategy. And I think it's interesting that, you know, at least on this webcast, it reflects that people don't really think of optimization as a strategy. It's something that's after the fact, or, you know, it just needs to be done to get to the next step. I think just the same way a system upgrade or an implementation is an IT strategy or a business strategy, I think optimization is just as important. And I hope I can prove that to you even more so through this webcast. Your ERP system now, and just one other thing about optimization, and that's something that, you know, even just from having promoted this webcast and spoken to people about it, people normally think of optimization of something that's technical. I think the, you know, technical guys at some time in the past have appropriated this term and used it, and it's now more, you think of optimization, you think of, oh, that means freeing up space on the database, or making it faster, or something like that. And it is actually possible that some people attending this webcast have thought that's what they're going to hear. And it really isn't. It's part of it, but I think it's a small piece of something that's much wider than that. You know, optimization is, to me, is more strategic than it's just a technical, you know, improving things technically. So in your ERP system, I have been to several companies as I do this optimization process, and seeing that, you know, there's still a lot of manual processing and awkward processes in the client system. And the ERP system seems to be used more just for transactional processing. It's almost like you are doing more work for the system than the system is doing for you. But the idea of the ERP system is to be the backbone of the organization. It should churn out information which is supposed to help you manage your business, as opposed, you know, I know clients that, especially at month end, you know, I'm in the financial module of SAP, so I'm heavily involved with clients in, you know, helping them with month end, and a lot of them go through the month end steps robotically, and some of those steps they don't even know what those steps, how those steps are going to help them or help the business. It's just something they were told to do, which is on a script, right? So this is where we're trying to say we need to have a smarter way of streamlining processes and making sure that they align with what you want to get out of the system. So perhaps some of the scenarios that we come across is finding that organizations they waste so much time with manual intervention and checking. They have awkward master data structures. They have custom programs which are holding them back and making regression testing a pretty onerous process. Okay. So why is a functional optimization necessary? The functional optimization helps you to run your business better by standardizing processes throughout the business, right? Making sure, like you could have a business with several divisions. They could even be spread all over the world. And these divisions are doing the same SAP transactions differently. Sometimes it's justified because of legal reasons or country-specific reasons. But sometimes it's just because that communication and coordination hasn't taken place across the organization about how to do things smarter. And if your organization is just going through its day-to-day processes without thinking strategically, that might be okay. You might not even notice that these differences are causing, bottlenecks and process inefficiencies. But it's normally when you want to do something like an upgrade, or implement some new software, or have some other decision that changes or impacts the way business is being done, that you realize that having these disparate ways of doing things actually has knock-on effects on what you get out of the system. Another thing with the functional optimization is following industry standards and SAP best practices. Now, best practices, I've been in the SAP space for about 20 years, and, we have this term bandied around like, there is some kind of holy grail somewhere that has the best way to do everything in SAP, and obviously that's not the case. Best practice is really an abstract term. There's nothing really that you can pinpoint that's the best way of doing things. Organizations are different. They have different processes, different requirements. They're in different countries. They have, a lot of staff. They have not a lot of staff. So when we say best practice, even though there are some common ways in doing things, realistically, there is always some deviation from company to company, and it sometimes is. It's relative. It's based on what your specific scenario is. So think of best practice when I use it as is this the best you can get out of the system? Is this the most optimal way of doing things without resorting to custom coding and things like that? Moving to a smart and better system, or a better thought-out design, even if you keep the same system. So that's another thing with the functional optimization. It doesn't always have to lead to implementing something new. It really could be just, how can I make the most of what I have right now? A lot of companies are not ready, for example, to go to S/4HANA, or they don't have the budget, or they've already invested so much in the software they already have that, it's not about, hey, the answer to this issue is let's implement new software. Having said that, it's normally the implementation of new software that catalyzes doing a functional optimization. Okay. Some of the benefits of optimization is, again, standard best practices, streamlined, faster, and flexible system, reduced total cost of ownership. Total cost of ownership, or TCO, that's another thing, another term that you hear a lot in marketing documents and presentations and things like that. And total cost of ownership is basically outside what you pay either for licenses or the basic support and management of SAP. Is there other stuff as well that's included in that to manage, maintain, monitor the system? Stuff that is you're only spending money on because the system itself is not as optimized as it should have been. So TCO is something you'll see a couple of other times, a couple more times in this presentation. It's something that is important to reduce, and I think optimization helps you to do that. Some other things is having a lean, agile, and competitive system, harmonizing having harmonized processes and increasing efficiency and reducing costs, which leads to better profitability. So what are some of the reasons for changing what you originally implemented to going on a more optimized or different course? The original blueprint was not well thought out and did not allow for the expansion of your business. Now, I've been on a lot of projects, and I know that in many projects this is the case. And that's because during an SAP implementation, there are objectives that are not always looking at how do we make the system run perfectly long term, and how do we get the system to work for us and us not to work for the system. A lot of implementations have other agendas. In fact, sometimes multiple agendas which don't actually align with each other. And you have budget, which is normally a key aspect of it. You have a timeline, maybe a deadline you want to meet. You have maybe a certain, based on the personnel in your implementation, that might create its own challenges. And so it compromises having a well thought out blueprint, right? So it kind of takes you off path from where you should be. Sometimes acquisitions, sometimes you will have a good implementation, but as businesses change, especially in our times where companies are merging, they're acquiring other companies. Sometimes you acquire another company that's a totally different business model from your company, but your blueprint, your implementation was based on your company. So now you have two different systems, or two different system requirements which don't fit in with each other, right? Replace bespoke, and every time I say bespoke, and it's more a European-based term, just means customized. Replace custom functionality with standard functionality. You taking advantage of HANA is obviously was the most the biggest reason why people are thinking of an optimization, and it also, just so you know, it's even with what ERPfixers does. Most of the requests we get for optimization are from companies who are thinking of moving to S/4HANA, right? And then maintaining a suboptimal system comes with certain costs, and having an optimized system actually, even if not evident initially, does reduce overall costs of managing an inefficient system. Right, so what normally happens based on acquisitions, poor implementations, just bad processes altogether, you have this mishmash of processes that don't necessarily fit into the SAP standard way of doing things. Ideally, what you want to have is harmonized processes across divisions of your company which fit in with the best practice. And again, I want to come back to that term best practice, not meaning something very tangible and finite. It's more of a loose, abstract term, but which conceptually means doing the things the right way. So whether you're moving to S/4HANA or not, it still makes sense to carry out a functional optimization. In fact, I was doing functional optimizations before I even heard of HANA, right? This was just basically one of the key scenarios that I have in the past was companies that implemented SAP in 1999. We call them Y2K customers. They implemented SAP because there was some information at that time that said, if you implement SAP, you'll get rid of your Y2K problem. Y2K problem meaning the problem of the date 1999 not switching over correctly to the year 2000, instead being reset or something. And a lot of people use that fear mongering to make a lot of money. So some companies just moved to SAP in 1999, but didn't think of SAP as a strategic tool for making your business processes work better. So those companies, it's funny because almost, I had at least 5, 6 customers around 1998, 99 who implemented, 2008, 2009, who implemented in 1999. And it was like 7, 8 years after they said, okay, what do we do with this system? We've implemented this system. We're finding out, things are not working the way we're not using it to the best of its capacity. What can we do? I just find it interesting. There was a certain period of time after implementing the system that they now decided that, maybe we should do something about it. Okay? So even if you're not moving to HANA, it's best to have a system that's aligned with business processes, and have an optimization exercise which highlights unused functionality, simplifies upgrades and expansion, and again reduces your TCO. I think we all know the concept of garbage in, garbage out. You can move to S/4HANA or to what are the other new technologies out there. If you don't have a system that is streamlined and is not full of bad master data, you will have the same thing in these new environments. And I think that's one of the reasons that a lot of companies are looking more at optimizing before they go to S/4HANA, because no matter what you read about S/4HANA, there's nothing that says that we're going to get rid of all your garbage. If you put it in, you get it out. So if you're considering a move to S/4HANA, that's a good opportunity to do some kind of optimization, data cleansing, business process streamlining. It's a really good time to take full advantage of the new functionality. And you'll see that the new functionality, if you have a good system going in, I mean, the sum of that functionality is just excellent. So it's something that, it's a win-win if you could manage your data and manage your processes, feed them into S/4HANA, and benefit from the new functionality. It's better to do it right now. Take the time to do it now, and as is the title of this webcast, I think this is an inflection point. This is a time that a lot of businesses should start thinking about it. Even if you don't do it, start thinking about it, because for most of the customers I speak to, they're either doing an S/4HANA project or they're 1 or 2 years away from doing it. So the steps and determining the best route for doing this. First of all, obviously, you need an initial external review. An initial review will show if an optimization project is necessary and to what extent and what resources will be required. So, some companies, just based on the size of the company, the personnel they have, the timing, it's not always the case that an optimization project is needed at the time. Sometimes it's just not the best thing. So first of all, have an initial review. And although the title of this slide is external review, it can be an internal review. It's just sometimes, the team is so tied up with different things that it's sometimes good to have a fresh set of eyes to look at your processes and your situation to know if you need one. It makes sense to document your as-is processes, what you're doing right now, to ensure that the business critical processes are covered, and also to highlight any areas that you can improve. Some companies already know. I've been called in, and the company has already given me a bullet list and saying, these are the areas that we want to optimize in our system. Not every company does, but some actually, they know. They just haven't had the time to do it. If you can use KPIs and industry averages to compare your situation with some benchmark, that's also useful. Making the business case is obviously a very important thing because, even if everything I'm seeing or everything people have heard about optimization sounds good, it is sometimes hard to prove to management that has so many other requirements that are competing for a budget, it sometimes is hard to make the case. So what we have encountered and what we tell people is there are some tangible benefits. There's also some intangibles. I mean, there's definitely increased productivity. If the system runs better, you're not wasting so much time doing reconciliation and other things. As I mentioned before, I work in the finance part of SAP. So there's no other department that bears the brunt of a poorly designed system than in the finance area. And I know I'm biased by saying this, but I think it's true, because as I joke with my logistics counterparts, once you press the save button, that's a completed test for you. Finance has to reconcile. They have to make sure every I is dotted, T is crossed. And some of them even go down to the very last penny. So if things are wrong, finance normally gets it. So I think without having all those month-end tasks and reconciliation processes to do, you will find that productivity is increased and processes are more streamlined. There's better and consistent reporting and analysis. Obviously, if you have bad data, you're going to have no matter how pretty your reports look, they will not be meaningful and they will not be accurate. Transparency of information, I mean, that obviously in an integrated system, you want to make sure that if one person says the numbers are this or the data is this, you can easily go in there and see that data. The data reconciles with all other modules in the system that have that attribute in their master data or transactional data. And it's very easy for you to get to explain either to an auditor or a party that's interested why a certain number or a certain statistic is the way it is. I mentioned fewer adjustments and faster time to close is also obviously something more related to finance, but it's also something that if you don't have to do that, it makes things much better. Determine the best path to take. So you can do an optimization, as I mentioned, in the same system. This is something I've been doing for several years. That is just making the most of what you have right now. Now, when you're talking of HANA, there are options to progress along the path to HANA. One is converting ECC to S/4HANA. That's probably the most common. The other is a greenfield implementation, and another is central finance. I'll talk about those in the next few slides. In your existing system, it's not always possible to have an existing system optimization, but it is the cheapest and fastest way to go, right? You're just making things better with what you have. Some things are difficult to change because of the historical issues that have happened. Sometimes it's just difficult to untangle all the stuff that has been set up in the system and for some companies, this could be 1 or 2 decades. All companies in the system may be affected by some of these settings. So if you have, for example, new general ledger, when you activate it, it's activated on a client level, right? So sometimes if you wanted to do something just because to help one division, sometimes all companies in that client will be affected by it. So that sometimes leads to a challenge. And some changes can only be done at a certain point in time. The next is the greenfield implementation. That's the best way for clean and ready to run processes. This greenfield basically meaning start everything from scratch. It's like a new SAP implementation. Any mess you've built up, you leave that behind. If you are planning to use something like S/4HANA Cloud, that's more standardized because it's S/4HANA Cloud you're using a system that has very, very specific functionalities based on how SAP expects it to work. So you can't go mess around and tinker with things and do custom programming, which makes it much harder if you're migrating your system as opposed to doing a greenfield. If you're on-premise or private for a HANA transition, that gives you more freedom than if you're in the cloud. But also with the Greenfield, there's going to be a lot of historical data that you have to bring into the new system, which if you had a straight up conversion, as I mentioned in the previous slide, you don't have to do that. A brownfield implementation is kind of a hybrid. That's basically saying, okay, you can move to HANA, but you don't have to change anything. Just move with what you have right now. And SAP has some optimization, some packages where you can move over to HANA, and you can, but you don't need to. If you don't want to take advantage of the new functionality, and you want to just keep things exactly the way they are, that you could do that. It gets a little messy sometimes, but it might be a way. It might be the only way some systems can, some companies can progress in the path to S/4HANA. And then another option for S4 is to use central finance. This is also a kind of hybrid option. This means that even though you stay with your ECC client, you have interfaces, and these are SAP-based interfaces called System Landscape Tools that pass the information into an S/4HANA client. So you can still keep transacting your ECC system. You could also transact in the S/4HANA system, but at least you're not having to clean. It gives you more time to clean things up. It's very similar to the brownfield, but with this, you still keep your ECC system. So those last few slides were just to show the options for wanting to move to S/4HANA and how an optimization works within that process. So some critical success factors: involve the right stakeholders early, agree on certain group policies, make sure certain policies that are organization-wide or have the agreement of every other business unit. Avoid scope creep and manage expectations. I mean, you might have heard of some of this when you were doing your original SAP implementation. In fact, it's not that different. It's just that these things do have to be considered for an optimization. Keep modifications down to a minimum. You know, the way from having worked with clients from the 90s to now, if you showed me your SAP system, I can pretty much tell you around what year you implemented it based on how much custom code there is in there. Those in the 90s had almost everything they could think of. They just created custom code for it. Those later on weren't using as much, and that's also because SAP evolved. At first, SAP did not have some functionality, so clients had no choice. And also, there wasn't information about how to use SAP wasn't as prevalent. So even if the functionality was there, you know, there wasn't any Google back then, as it wasn't as it is right now. How do I do this? How do I do that? So you run into a problem, create a custom code. But that is now being kind of peeled off, and so the idea is to move towards less modification than more modification. And another important thing, in fact, the last important thing I'd say before I hand over to Sydnie is, you know, the idea is not to replicate what you have right now, whether it's with a straight-on optimization project or even with one that is going to S/4HANA. The project should be more than just we're going to be on a different system. It should be more about what are we getting out of that system? What do we need to do now to get what we want out of that system? Okay, so I'm going to hand over to Sydnie. And Sydnie will talk more about something. Sydnie is a business user, and she will talk about some more tangible aspects of doing an optimization, and hopefully ones that you will relate to more than something maybe more generic. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Paul. First, we'll talk just for a second about Woodward. We're an international manufacturing company, primarily in the industrial and aerospace and defense markets. We've got 3 manufacturing sites around the globe that are running full SAP ERP. The entire company is on SAP GL, but most of the rest of our manufacturing sites are running a custom homegrown ERP. Our first SAP site went live in 2012 on Enhancement Pack 4. Earlier this year, we went live on Enhancement Pack 8 as part of the preparation that we needed to do to be on SAP revenue recognition software. And then also because we felt like we were getting a little bit behind on our enhancement packs. Some of the future plans that we have, we're currently working on revenue accounting and reporting. That's in process. Again, one of our most recent projects was particularly to prep for this material ledger. This is something that we've talked about for several years, but haven't implemented yet, so we will be looking at that sometime in the future. We will be implementing SAP at our remaining manufacturing locations, replacing the homegrown system with commercial off-the-shelf software. Eventually, we know we'll be looking at S/4HANA, possibly Central Finance, and then, always looking at other enhancements to our systems, other ways to improve how we're doing business. One particular optimization opportunity that we've been working on recently is around setting deletion flags on production orders. Since we went live, we've got over 700,000 production orders in our system. We've never archived anything up to this point. Our COEP table with all of the controlling line items is over 6 billion records now and over 2 terabytes. Since we've never archived, we've got huge database size. We have a lot of issues related to that. So we would really want to move to where we can start archiving and kind of, if not decrease the size of our database, at least keep it from growing quite so quickly. We're also seeing a lot of longer and longer run times for our production order settlement process. Every new order that comes in creates new settlement documents. Even our orders that have already been settled for several years, since they've never been archived or marked for deletion, they're also creating more line items. Maybe not GL line items, but you're still seeing controlling line items contributing to the growth of our tables. We also have really long load times for our BI tools. Anytime that we make changes and have to clear a table or clear an info cube and reload it, we have really long run times for those kinds of things. And then our client refreshes also take a significant amount of time anytime we're refreshing, say, a test or sandbox client from production. That tends to take sometimes up to a week, depending on what client we're refreshing, and in large part it's because of that controlling table being so large. So setting the deletion flags on these orders, this is something that I had done at prior companies and was able to see an immediate impact in the length of time that our settlement jobs took. So I knew that that was something that we could do right away to really improve some of these data issues that we have. This flag will let the settlement process basically ignore all of those orders so that it'll speed up your processing time because it has fewer things to look at. It's also one of the steps that you have to do when you archive, so getting this done early will let us prep for any future archiving project that we have. And it will let some reports kind of run more quickly. Some of the production order information system reports will run more quickly if they don't have to sift through all of these orders with deletion flags already set. So to start out with, we have been working in a sandbox system, just trying to measure the impact of what we're doing. We have a small analyst team working on this, myself and a couple of operations analysts, and recently pulled in another FICO analyst. We've also been working with ERPfixers on this to kind of point us in the right direction. We ran into a lot more errors and issues than we expected, so we were able to work with ERPfixers to to get some better ideas about what kind of messages we're actually seeing and how to go about solving those. And then we're also pulling in some business users here and there to kind of discuss our current business processes, what we're doing, where we can improve, what kind of roadblocks we're seeing in actually setting these deletion flags. So in our sandbox system, we start out with transaction CO78. There's actually quite a few places that you can do this. CO78 will let you run through the whole archiving process for production orders. So we've started there. You basically just set up a selection variant for it. It runs in the background, and then you'll get a list of errors, messages, information messages to sift through. So what we found in reviewing these logs is we actually have more processing configuration issues than we expected. We expected to see a few things where we could improve, but we actually found a lot more than we'd expected. So that gives us, again, more opportunity to optimize our systems. So some of the things that we ran into: incomplete HR data transfers, and we'll talk about each of these a little more on the next slides. Open inspection lots on thousands of old orders. Open purchase orders where we've done external processing on a production order. Those have been left open. And then some open COGI errors as well. And then those are the bulk of the issues and messages that we found, but there are a few other smaller things that we're sifting through as time allows. So with the HR data transfers, this is something that most of us had never seen before. We're running the HR module in SAP very minimally. We use an external system for HR, so we couldn't really figure out what this was trying to do or why we would ever need it. What we found through working with ERPfixers is that there's functionality here that will allow you to transfer data about labor confirmations into your HR system, into SAP HR, that you can then use for various reporting or metrics or bonus type calculations, things like that. But that's not something that we've ever even looked at. So we found that it's creating these records because of a pretty simple flag and configuration saying basically to create them. So we've corrected our configuration there, which really goes back to our initial blueprint. We just probably didn't dig deep enough into some of that configuration to figure out what we really needed. So we've corrected the configuration to prevent any more of these transfer records from being created. And then we found an SAP note that would give us a program to actually delete any of the existing transfer data. Since we know we'll never use it, at least at this point, we went ahead and deleted that and were able to set the deletion flags on that bunch of orders. Next thing we found is open inspection lots. We have implemented some process improvements over the last couple of years to help prevent these inspection lots from staying open, making sure that the quality team is closing those out as they occur and not leaving them open. But we still have thousands and thousands of these from our first few years on SAP that are open that we're working on figuring out how to close. We started with an LSMW but ran into some issues with it, so we found a BOPI that will let you set the usage decision on those for the older orders, and then with our process improvements, we'll prevent those from happening in the future. Open purchase orders. We don't have as many of these as we do the open inspection lots, but there's still probably a couple of thousand of these that we're looking into. We use purchase orders to manage external processing when we have a production order and we send something out to a different company to perform one step of that. And it turns out we've been leaving these purchase orders open for years and years. In some cases, there's some GRIR records that have never been cleared. we're looking at these still to determine if we have any financial impact from these, and if we do, what to do about that impact, because most of these are several years old. We don't want to take a hit or a credit on our P&L now for something that happened years ago, and in many cases was probably dealt with through a manual journal entry. And we're also looking in investigating best practices. I know Paul spoke about best practices, but we're looking for what's the best way for us to handle these external processing expenses on production orders. Should we leave these purchase orders open forever? What do we need to do to close those out, etc. COGI errors. This is another area where over the last couple of years we've made a lot of process improvements here to make sure that these are being cleared out in a timely manner and done appropriately through the COGI transaction. What we've found is in the past, the error may stay open in COGI, but somebody would have done, say, either a manual journal entry or a manual material movement or manual confirmation, something like that, to correct the inventory balances or correct the expenses on the order. So we're finding now there's still a lot of these open on our older orders. And again, similar to what we have with the open purchase orders, as we clear these, you will see an immediate financial impact. So we're also determining how much is that and what's the best way for us to mitigate that. Once we're finished with this, the end result of this particular optimization project will have much cleaner data, which of course leads to more accurate information, which everyone wants. We expect to see much slower growth in our table sizes. We've made a couple of other configuration tweaks and process tweaks on our settlement processes to help slow the growth of tables like COEP, but this will also help immensely by clearing out setting deletion flags on several years worth of old production orders that we don't need to see anymore. That'll help all of these processes ignore those and not create new documents for those. We'll be ready for an archival project. As soon as our basis team is ready for us to do it, we'll have these production orders ready to go and ready to archive and get off the system. We've also not just identified some of the process improvements that have already been implemented, but we've identified a lot of areas where we can improve processes in the future and prevent some of these errors from happening going forward. And then one of the most visible things for our finance team, at least, will be faster processing times for their settlement processes and reporting. By being able to skip through all these deletion flag orders, their settlement processes will go more quickly. It will make our financial close run more quickly and make all our finance people happy. Okay, we'll go back to Paul now. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sydnie. And I think that was probably a more realistic dose of what happens in the optimization than how I was verbalizing it, because sometimes, as a consultant, I've seen, I'm trying to give a very generic view of, what the situation is and how to resolve it. But I think, as you can hear from what Sydnie said, there's a lot of work, a lot of consideration going into it, and there's some challenges which need to be considered before you can move forward and be successful with this process. So I'm just going to talk about some areas that are triggered by optimization issues and how some suggestions of things that can resolve issues that you currently have. And I think I have 3 or 4 of these areas before we close. Finance, in the finance area, which is pretty much my area, there's normally time wasted reconciling, checking, correcting data if you have a poorly designed process. Unfortunately, with the finance area, which, by the way, I think is the most important area, but that's what I'd say, it's very difficult to justify expenditure. Expenditure with finance is normally, if it's not a tax legislation or some kind of legal change, it's normally seen as a back office function that, you know, is really secondary to the more customer-facing issues a company could have. But, you know, obviously finance, you know, good or bad finance could also cripple an organization. So consider the control aspects that a good finance optimization will lead to. And then also profitability analysis is often an area that can be improved if a change in another call it a downstream or an upstream area is improved, then your profitability analysis and reporting will also be improved. In the procurement area, these are more tangible things that companies can probably see more of why they would want to improve or enhance those areas. Things like having self-service catalogs, approval automation, approved vendors for better discounts, sending documents electronically. So, you know, implementing some kind of software to help that happen, and then doing scanning or automating postings of incoming invoices against purchase orders. So several ways in the procurement area that you can improve, enhance, or optimize to and see the tangible benefits of those. In the cash management area, the automation of banking flows, like sending payments to banks, bank statements, and automatic payment matching, these are all things that reduce the time and efforts and potential errors. And exception reporting, so that a resource can be directed at credit control and improving cash flow, and improved liquidity flow and cash management reporting. A lot of good tools in S/4HANA for this, in the new cash management module. And but even if you don't have that, I know companies that still are not doing electronic banking. They're doing a more manual process in SAP. Even moving to electronic banking, which nowadays everybody, you know, should at least everybody's bank should have something that electronic banking file that can be uploaded. So even things like simple things like that can improve processes and productivity. For sales and inventory, there's definitely scope for improving profitability analysis. So sales and inventory, one of the upstream modules, which if things are straightened out and optimized there, will help you with profitability analysis reports. Also, optimizing your sales and inventory area helps target the right customers with the right products, and it gives you better inventory turnaround, control, and valuation. And the several on Fiori, which is the newer interface, you have it on your tablet or your cell phone, and you definitely get some views that would help you with some of this. So now we're going to go to questions. As Susan said, there is, you can post questions throughout the webcast. If you have any, we have about 5 more minutes. Please submit the questions and by clicking on the Q&A button. And if we can't answer all the questions right now, I'll definitely make sure that we answer them and send them to you after this webcast. We also have an optimization white paper that has more information about optimization than we can give you in 1 hour. The link is right here, is showing up, and it's also in the resources. You can click on the link. It's in the resources section of the view that you have right now. So I'm going to hand it over to Susan.
Thank you, Paul. Yes, we are now moving on to the question and answer portion of our webinar. If you have any questions, now is the time to submit them using the purple Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. All right, we've got a couple of audience questions already. The first question is, do you think the SAP tools, SAP VLM, Value Discovery, or Celonis can supplement the functional optimization?
Yeah, I'm not familiar. I've heard of VLM. I'm not familiar with exactly what the tool does, but if my memory serves me right, I think it does some kind of run through this. It's almost a technical run through of the system that identifies weak spots. And there are several tools like that. There might even be tools in Solution Manager. And I know there's reverse business engineering tools that do that. I think the answer is yes, but. And the but is one of the problems that I've found with things like doing optimizations is people try to reduce it to something that's technical. And one of the points I'm trying to raise in this webcast that it's more than just technical. And I say that because you could have a pretty good tool that goes through your system and highlights areas that need to be improved and things like that. And you do that, you improve it, and then you're done. And you do nothing after that. And my point here with this is that the optimization should be looked at more strategic, more big picture, something that is ongoing, not something that, hey, we checked the box and we ran this tool, or we run this tool every now and then, and all the other areas, some of the stuff that Sydnie and myself have been talking about, they're not addressed because you've said you've run this tool. So I would say the answer is yes, but don't restrict the solution to just an IT solution. I think it's bigger than that.
Thank you, Paul. The next question is, how long was the optimization effort at Woodward?
We're actually still working on it. It's gone on and off for a few months now, but over the last probably month and a half, we've been working pretty steadily on it. It's unfortunately hasn't been the top priority for all of us, so it's not getting all of the resources we probably need, but it is moving along pretty steadily. I know when I've done this in the past, without so many errors and messages to sift through, it's taken maybe a month interspersed with other projects, of course.
Thank you, Sydnie. The next question is to Paul. For companies with heavily customized processes, is it always advisable to run the optimization project before even the start of the project scoping for HANA S4? Our current process is customized over 70%.
Wow, 70%. So I'm going to make a guess to whoever made that submitted that question that they probably implemented SAP in the 90s. I think that's typically what that kind of percentage is pretty high, and I think that's what we see. So my answer to that would be I suggest doing it before, because the optimization project is more than just moving to S4HANA. It's about making things work. With a good optimization project, you can make things work better now. In optimization projects I've been on, it's not just, although it's really a strategic process, as I've mentioned, there's also some low-hanging fruits, things that you can deal with right now that are causing you issues. I had an optimization project with a client a few months ago, and it was actually with a view to moving to S4HANA, and I mentioned S4HANA's intercompany, how it's improved the intercompany reconciliation process, and the customer didn't even know SAP had an intercompany reconciliation process, and now we've implemented that process in their ECC system. So I think I would say if you haven't already started the project, I think it's good to, if you haven't started the HANA scoping project, start the optimization project now anyway. That's what I would say. If it's practically feasible, I would say start it anyway. And it can also be rolled in to the S4HANA project if there's things that you can identify that by improving them will make a certain functionality in S4HANA better. I'll give you another example. Another customer, they don't have company code validation turned on. If you don't have company code validation turned on, when you go to S4HANA, you have a problem because you need company code validation for the universal journal to work, right? Another customer, they use cost object hierarchies for a lot of their variance calculations and their reporting in S/4HANA, cost objects are not even a thing that are there's a replacement for that. So if you can identify certain things which in S/4HANA will be, there's definitely either going to cause challenges or will be improved with it, you might as well start looking at that now.
Thank you, Paul. The next question is, do companies typically do an optimization of all modules at once, or do they take it step by step?
Well, that's one of the, I'll give a typical consulting answer, it depends. It's normally, when I'm called in, it's of two types. The customer knows exactly what they want to do the optimization for. Just like with Sydnie. In Sydnie's area, they know that they have this issue with closing production orders. They know exactly, it's more specific, even though it has tentacles in other areas. Some companies don't know. They just know that things are not running correctly. They know that their month end is taking 10 days to close. They know that, there's so many Excel spreadsheets we don't match with each other. And in those cases, when we go in, sometimes that leads to a much bigger project than they were thinking. So it's hard to actually, put your finger on whether it should be one module at a time or everything at once. It really depends on the company. I think the initial analysis of the optimization is a key to determining whether this should be done on a phase, it should be phased, or if it should be, let's do multiple modules at once.
Thank you, Paul. Next question is, do you have a best practices template that needs to be followed for the different modules?
As I mentioned, the template, SAP does have its best practices, methodology, and I think this came out maybe even 10 years ago, and it gives some good guidelines, but there's much more to it like that. I think if you kind of align what I'm saying with what I said earlier, which is that best practice is not one very finite, tangible thing. It's really an ideal scenario based on what your specific situation is, and it differs by company. So I would say that there are definitely some best practice rules to follow, but depending on analyzing the system, the company situation, that might need to be tweaked here and there. So you have a best practice template, but don't take that as the law. Use that and apply it to your own specific scenario.
All right, thank you, Paul. I think we're going to go ahead and wrap up now. Thank you for a great webcast. On behalf of ASUG, I'd like to thank ERPfixers as well as all of you who took the time to attend this webcast. Paul, would you like to leave any closing remarks?
Well, just thank you very much. Thanks for attending. I hope this was useful. If you have any questions, please just feel free to send us an email. And thanks a lot to Sydnie for giving us a realistic view of how an optimization should work.
Thank you. And before we go, I would like to leave our audience members with some quick information on ASUG for anyone unfamiliar with our organization. ASUG helps connect SAP customers to the people and information that provide insight, influence, and inspiration they need to maximize the return on their investment in SAP and drive innovation at their organizations. We offer 38 chapters and 90+ special interest groups, including access to digital content like this webinar. If you'd like more information, please message info@asug.com. The recording and slides from today's program will be posted to the ASUG website, and all registrants will receive an email with the link to those materials. With that, I would like to close today's webcast. Have a great rest of your day, everyone.